Thank you for tuning in tonight to our Leo Talk, where we're talking about project-based learning and what our school is doing to implement that type of strategy into our classrooms. Good evening and welcome to Middleburg Community Charter School for our first Leo Talks of the year. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce a special guest in the audience, Ms. Jill Turgeon, one of our school board members. It's my pleasure to be here as first-year principal at Middleburg Community Charter School. We're getting ready to wrap up our first quarter of instruction, and this is a prime time for us to present the PBL, project-based learning presentation that you're going to be seeing tonight. Originally, the PTO addressed myself and Miriam Huey-Guy about doing this presentation. Miriam and I, we collaborated and figured it would be much better if it came from the teachers themselves. So I'm going to introduce our teachers tonight. We have 5 of our 6 lead teachers here that will be doing the presentation for you. So without further ado, Ms. Jillian Lucas, who's one of our K-1 teachers. Ms. Katie Brennan, who is one of our 4-5 teachers. Ms. Mackenzie Escobar, our other K-1 teacher. Ms. Cara Morgan, one of our 2-3 teachers. And starting off the program tonight will be Ms. Taryn Browning, one of our 2-3 teachers as well.
Okay, welcome everyone. It's so wonderful to see everyone. Is the mic on? Are we good? All right, good. Okay. First overview, we're going to talk about what is PBL, why PBL, and also how do we do PBL at MCCS.
I'm here to present what is PBL and why is PBL. And while I could probably stand here and just blabber on about how amazing it is, we thought we would introduce the topic with this really cool video that we think wraps it up really neatly, just as an introduction to the topic.
You remember what it was like in school. It was boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be more interesting and effective by focusing students on work that matters. This is project-based learning explained. Most adults live in a world of projects. Whether it's a job assignment, home improvement, or planning a wedding, we need to actively solve problems. But unfortunately, schoolwork looks more like this than this. Let's take a look at this project-based world. Meet Claire. She was recently presented with a challenge. Her company, Super Suds, makes soap, and it was up to her to find the most earth-friendly way to produce it in the future. Her boss gave her a budget and a few requirements, and it was up to her to come up with a solution. She organized and managed a team who researched the options and created materials summarizing the issues. Claire's team asked for feedback and presented their findings to the boss. Claire came out of the project looking like a rock star, and she learned a lot about green products. If you look closely, Claire's success involved critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, things that aren't often taught in traditional classrooms. The world needs more Claires, so how do we get them? The answer is project-based learning, or PBL. By focusing students on a project, teachers put them on a path that deepens their knowledge and builds skills they'll need in the future. Here's what I mean. Mr. Simmons has always been a good science teacher, and his students do well on Friday's tests. Unfortunately, what they learned was gone by Saturday morning. That wasn't good enough for him. Soon he learned about project-based learning and decided to give it a shot. Mr. Simmons got the idea for his first project on microorganisms when nearly half of his students were suddenly absent with the flu. He asked his students why they thought so many of their classmates got sick at the same time. That lively discussion produced a lot of good questions and a list of things the kids wanted to know. Mr. Simmons then announced their project was to help elementary school kids understand, how can we not get sick? After dividing the class into teams, he got them started on the project. It was up to the students to ask questions, research, collaborate, give each other feedback, and figure out the best ways to make their points clear to children. One team chose to make an educational video on the connection between hand washing and avoiding the flu. Another chose to create posters to show how viruses spread. The project teams showed off their final work to an enthusiastic audience of parents and their children at a nearby elementary school. Sitting in the front row was our good friend and local rock star Claire, who saw a bit of herself in the students. It was clear that the project was a success for the students, the audience, and Mr. Simmons. His students practiced critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. The project wasn't about memorization, but learning in depth about viruses and how to prevent spreading disease, a lesson they will never forget. At the end of the presentation, Claire introduced herself to the students and told them that they were rock stars and that the world needs more people who can think like them. To learn more about project-based learning, go to BIE.org.
One of the great things that I love about this video is that it also kind of addresses a big question that a lot of us have when we think about project-based learning. Project-based learning is great. The kids get up, they do hands-on, they're task-oriented, but how does that address the SOLs that we all know that we're being held accountable for? Well, in this case, they were solving a problem that involved viruses. So therein lies those SOLs that people are constantly asking questions for. If the project-based learning project surrounds an SOL topic like biology, like life sciences, like social sciences, like mathematical concepts, then you are being able to address both the SOLs through the task-oriented style of project-based learning. So that's just a brief answer to that big question, but I did want to point that out. So then we get to the second big question. Why PBL? Everyone says it's great. Everyone says, oh, this is the new way of teaching. So we've got engaging and relevant, which I believe came up here earlier. Learn more deeply, build the success skills that Mr. Larson just brought up, address modern day academic standards, opportunities for the students to use technology, making teaching more enjoyable and rewarding. I think that should say teaching/learning, because I mean, I'm having fun, but I know my kids are having fun too. PBL connects students and schools with communities and the real world. I actually think that I actually kind of planned this, because I'm pretty sure all of those answers were ones that came out of you guys' mouth. So awesome, you passed the pop quiz.
Has that video that you just showed been shown to the kids?
No, it has not, at least not to my knowledge. But it definitely is something that, now that you bring it up, sounds like a great idea. Yep. So here we have a video I just wanted to share with you guys briefly of what project-based learning can look like in the real classroom setting. The students were given a task. How can you get a tennis ball to travel the greatest amount of distance using simple machines? That's it. They were allowed to use classroom materials. They could use things that they brought from home. This was beginning stages. I think this was the second week that we were exploring this concept. We were covering the SOLs of simple machines. We were covering motion. We were covering measuring distance, because we were going to be using meter stick and yardstick and whatnot. And we were also covering the scientific process. We were observing, we were recording our answers, we were reflecting on it, and then coming up with new ways to solve that problem the next week. If you could go ahead and
So what I'm doing is I'm making a track. I'm making a track, so this goes up, so the ball goes through this down, and you go here, and it has succeeded, but this
So that was just a quick snapshot of what PBL can look like in the classroom. The kids are so proud of the work that they're doing. They will talk to you for hours on just how amazing what they're doing is. And that's what really we want to see in those classrooms. We don't want to see students say, here, I did it, what do I do next? You know, you want to have the kids say, what I just did was X, Y, and Z. Be proud of what they just learned, and then it sticks with them. We're going to have Katie take it on next and explain some Bloom's taxonomy.
Okay, so this is Bloom's taxonomy. How many people have heard of Bloom's taxonomy before? Awesome. Good. That's my job as a teacher, to teach you about it. Okay, so Bloom's taxonomy is a way of questioning students, starting at the bottom, very easy, just basic knowledge, going all the way to the top at evaluation. That is where your higher level thinking comes in. All of you have a chart, a copy of the Bloom's taxonomy, and you can see the verbs that are on the sides. And we are trying to engage students by asking these kind of questions. So for example, if I'm talking about the Civil War, if I'm going to go with knowledge, I would ask them to simply copy things out of their textbook, ask them textbook questions. If I went with comprehension, number 2, I would have them make a poster of a battle or of the Civil War. Number 3, application, maybe have them create a reader's theater of a battle. Number 4 is analysis. I would have them group the battles based on the certain traits. Number 5 would be the synthesis. So they would have different outcomes of the battle. So what would have happened, if the battles were different, and so on and so forth. Number 6 would actually be, what would the world be like today if the outcome of the Civil War was different? What would our generation, our time, our present, current time be like today? So it's just expanding what they know and having them apply it to real life application. Wonderful, so you guys see how much we put into actually planning our instructions around this to make sure that we kind of hit as many of these levels as we can in our daily projects. So great, so now I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Mackenzie Escobar.
Thank you. All right, I might stay seated so I can click the next button. So we just wanted to give a few pictures of some snapshots of how we do project-based learning here at MCCS. So the first one, so the way project-based learning works is typically, us as teachers, we start with a driving question. At the end of the unit, what do we want our students to come away knowing? So for this first one, the driving question was, what is the best way to clean pennies or other coins? And you can see the students here testing out their different theories. They look like they're having a blast.
I wanted to say something about that. That was an impromptu project-based learning experience, one that I'm ashamed to say that the kids were right and I was wrong. They told me the OxyClean, I refused to believe them. They told me all the commercials, it removes stains. I told them that this is not laundry. We went back and forth. They won. OxyClean works.
One of the beauties of project-based learning is we don't actually know the answer all the time. The kids teach us stuff every day. Another one we had, driving question, using classroom materials, how can we model or represent the anatomy of a butterfly? So instead of memorize the anatomy of a butterfly, it was a challenge to think about what materials do we have, how can we put them together, thinking deeply about what composes the anatomy of a butterfly. Very classy butterfly. This one, as we saw in the video, driving question, how can we use simple machines to make a tennis ball travel the farthest distance possible? And I was telling this table over here the other day I was teaching, and this little boy pops his head in my room, do not open the door, whatever you do, and then closes it. And so, of course, I had to go open the door. So I look out, and there are tennis balls flying down the hallway, machines up and down. I'm glad that they warned us so we could be safe, but it was great to see them out using the school, really testing out their ideas. All right. So more on the planning side of project-based learning. So you guys just got to put yourselves in our shoes. What it's like to try to think of a big question and then think of how to assess students' knowledge at all these different levels, right? Not just did they memorize the facts, but are they thinking deeply about it? Can they recreate? Can they analyze? Can they judge? Can they evaluate? So this is kind of what we keep in mind as we're thinking through a project-based learning unit for our classroom. So we try to ask big questions, solve real-world problems, and learn with a purpose. So here are some examples of asking big questions. How many pieces of paper does our school use in one day? How do you get a giraffe to fit in a refrigerator? And it's not just chop off its neck. There are other answers. What would the world be like without language? One we did in my class just the other day is how many things do we have in our classroom? And it ended up breaking into groups and inventorying how many, okay, you count the erasers, I'll count the markers, getting posters, sharing all that information. Back to asking big questions, solving problems, learning with a purpose. Solving problems. So trying to think about lasting things, not just something that you do at school and then go home and forget, but like Cara was talking about, doing something that you're proud of, that you want to share. So how can we make a contribution to our community? How can we teach each other new things? Because as we all know, especially as teachers, you learn best when you're teaching. How can we plan an event at our school? What's more rewarding than that? Learning with a purpose. You're planning, you're helping, you're imagining, you're saving, you're creating. And the kids know that. I think a lot of times we think that kids will just do whatever we tell them to, but kids know when what they're doing is worthwhile. And that really comes across to them. So when they feel like they're learning authentically, those are the things that are going to stick with them. All right, so next, moving on, we are going to share our quarter projects that we've been working on, soon to be revealed at Leo Night on Thursday. Hope to see you all again late at night. And Jillian is going to talk about our K1 project first.
We started with a big question, which is what makes an ideal community. And we talked about the kinds of buildings that you have in a community, what kinds of activities would you do in a community, what kind of things do you need in your community. So what the students went home and did was took a walk through their town. And they went with their families, they took a walk through the town, they saw what kind of buildings there were, what kind of activities they had, what kinds of things they needed that were already in their communities. They then went to the community building and they had an interview with one of the community workers. And they asked questions and then they wrote a little report about it. So this student went to an animal shelter and he spoke with someone and asked them, where do the animals come from? Where do they go when they get here? That kind of thing. So they were learning about what these community workers do. After that, after taking a tour of one of the community buildings, they then made a blueprint of their building. And they made a little map and brought it in, and this is the animal shelter again. So he did that. And then after that, they ended up making a building out of recycled materials to match their interview, to match their blueprint, which they have then brought into school. This is an example of the town hall that one of my students created. She had to go and figure out, what is a town hall? Why is that important in our community? So she did this all on her own and brought it into school. And then while at school, we talked about other things that are in our communities. Besides community buildings, we live in our communities, so we need homes. So we each made a blueprint of our homes, and then they actually made one. And they had free reign of however they wanted to do it. So as you can see, this one has a lot of windows. In addition to discussing and all of that, we read a lot of stories. We talked a lot about different kinds of community workers. The police came one day and had lunch with us. The firefighters came and had lunch with us one day and stayed for recess. So they were able to not only see it at home with their families, but also here at school with us. So, and after every student brings in their buildings, we will then create our own town in our classrooms using the homes and the community buildings that they have created. So that is our community project. So that's it.
All right, I am going to go over our 2-3 quarterly project, which they are so excited about presenting to you all on Leo Night. They've been working really hard this quarter. Our quarterly project, our driving question was, using $15,000, how can I plan a research trip to Greece or Rome? So they had to choose first, and we had a tug-of-war debate to figure out which place would be the best place to go visit. And that was so much fun. So then they decided which one they were going to choose after that. And let me see. I'm going to pop this up here just so everyone can see it a little better. All right, we have a rubric, a project rubric that the kids were familiar with that we went through that was broken up into 7 parts, including the presentation. This was both done at home and at school. So as many of you saw, I see many of my parents in the crowd, in our newsletter every Monday, we would send home the at-home portion of the project, and you would work on it with your child at home. And then they would come in and they would work on the collaborative part with their group. So they not only did this individually, but they also did this with a group of other students. And this is one of the reports. They took all their stuff that they did. All the places they were going to visit, and they typed up where they were going to visit, all about the Parthenon, all about the statue of Athena and Mount Olympus. That's one of them. And they put pictures up. They had to use graphing of the climate. What is the climate going to be like when you go through those dates? And we went online and we searched the climate. They had to take it. They had to average because a lot of them were not whole numbers. And then they had to create a graph to show what is the climate throughout the year. And then they would also know what the climate was in the month that they were going to be taking their trip. They also had to budget their meals. They have to eat when they go. So they used real menus, picked out their breakfast, picked out their lunches, picked out their dinners. They averaged what it would cost, and then they spread it out over the length of the trip. Some chose 10 days, some 14, some for a week. So they would average it that way and then add up how much money will they need to devote to their food. They also had to get there. So they had to get on there and find a flight. They had to find a hotel. And they had to figure out how they were going to get around once they got there. This, I think, was one of their favorite parts, picking out their rental cars. Yes, they could not wait to tell me about the sports cars and the Mini Coopers. So they had a lot of fun doing that. And again, they had to I can show you, if everyone will be able to see it. I'll leave it here, and you'll also be able to see it for Leo Night because they will be presenting it to you. For instance, flight details, leaving Washington October 24th, returning November 5th on the United Airlines ticket price, $1,248.60. And then they did the hotel, cost for 11 nights, and they got also with their rental car, and then they totaled the price. So they were using a lot of math skills, regrouping, adding money, all sorts of math skills. Also, within here, let me make sure I've hit everything, they created a postcard as well. That postcard was one of the at-homes that came back to school, and what they had to do is they had to write a friendly letter on the postcard home to someone telling them all about their trip and what they're doing, making sure to use those destinations, also addressing it correctly when it's sent. So those are coming in right now. Also, a map. They created a map showing all the different locations, those 3 destinations that they picked. So they have the map with their key, they've got their compass rose, so they're including all of the geography that we're working on as well. So just to let you know, here's one map. Here's the map that a student generated on the computer, showing all the different places he's going to go. And then also a postcard with a picture on the front, and then addressed and her letter on the back. And my favorite part is the end when she says where she's going to go, and then the last sentence says, "Then I'm going to eat gelato." I love gelato, which I absolutely love that. So I heard a lot of you ask, how does this connect to the standards? This list right here, these are all the standards that we're hitting in Q1 just off this one project. They are doing social studies, they're doing English, they're doing math, they're doing science, they're doing all of those standards within this one project, and they're loving every single minute of it. So I think that that's it on my part. So.
Okay, so our 4-5 project, the driving question is, you are traveling across Virginia. You need to stop in all 5 regions. Which route will you take to complete your journey? So, this was called the Amazing Race. That's what we had the kids call it. Each week, we would tell the kids on Monday a new challenge. So the first challenge was that they came up with this question. Just go through 5 states. Stop in a town from Berryville to Jonesville. Berryville's at the top, Jonesville's all the way at the bottom. Pretty simple. Then the next week, you have to make sure that at least 2 of those towns are historical towns, have some kind of historical reasoning behind them. The next week, you need to find a soil sample of rocks or different soils from each town that you stopped in. The next week, you need to make sure that you go through at least 2 of the 3 native languages that are recognized in Virginia that are spoken. So they did this together. One of the challenges is that they had to make 5 postcards. 2 were from the historical towns, 3 were from the other towns, all 5 from the stops that they were at. This student actually wrote her challenges and her detours, talked about where she was going from to how much it's going to cost her. The students had a budget of $5,000 to rent a car, to stay at a hotel if they needed to get their food, so on and so forth. And so they had to calculate how much it's going to cost with tax, how much gas is, what kind of car they're getting, and is that going to be a gas guzzler? Is it good on gas? And use that kind of economic skills with math. As far as geography goes, simple, going through, following a map. Regions of Virginia, huge, huge, huge in 4th and 5th grade. Also touching on the 5th grade science standard, we're right now in rock cycles, and going back into 3rd grade standards and some of 4th grade standards talking about the soils. So as you can see, it's all interlaid and combined together. Thank you. This student also, she made a dowel of, whoops. Don't tell her I did that. Of her postcard showing. And then she made a scrapbook of everything that she went through. You guys can see. So it's pretty cool. Some of the students decided to make a movie and mock their travels by steering in their parents' cars. Don't tell. And doing other fun things like that. So we gave them the opportunity to present it however they wanted. No guidelines on that. Just show us how you did your challenges. So the challenges were in class and some were in home. So pretty cool. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll try to keep this pretty short because I know we're running short on time. Also, we promise we would never actually leave you sitting this long lecturing if you were our real students. So, louder? Okay, here we go. So, this is awesome. As you can tell, we worked really hard and our students have worked really hard. If you come on Thursday, you'll see all the work and you'll see their excitement, you'll see the wonderful work they've produced, and you'll be able to tell that they're experts in these fields. We wanted to talk a little bit more before we end, just kind of in differentiating. What's the difference for teachers? What's the difference for the school, us versus a school that uses more traditional lesson plans? So if you were doing a traditional lesson plan, in my teacher education program, they teach you kind of this template. You get a template, you start with a hook. Something to engage the students. It can be 3 seconds. I just read a teacher book that says, do a 3-second hook to engage your students, and then they'll sit and listen to your lecture. It starts with a hook. Then you do an introduction. Here's what we're talking about today. You share the standards. And then there's something called the gradual release model. The I do, we do, you do. So I, as the teacher, I will show you exactly the steps you need to take to do this thing. Here's a math problem. Here's how we add math. Then we do, oh, Jimmy, will you come up and help me do this problem? You add these 2 numbers together. Then you do, okay, here's this worksheet. You practice on your own. And then at the end, some sort of assessment. Okay, let me take these worksheets, see what you did. So this is the traditional kind of mindset of a teacher. You're hitting at the things. You're assessing your students. You're walking them through it. You're scaffolding. You're hitting the standards. You're doing the things you need to do. But is it engaging? Is it authentic? Is it fun for you to teach? Is it fun for your students? So here's Cara with PBL to save the day.
Now, Mackenzie just said PBL to save the day, but what's interesting is as excited as we are as educators to get involved in this PBL, we've also, I hope I'm not the only one who feels this way, have also felt the pains of letting go of our training and everything that we were taught about how to plan a lesson and get into this PBL. Miss Browning and I had a meeting one day, and we were sitting there going through our 2 through 3 Greece and Rome, and we sat there and we realized, oh gosh, we're not going to have class the way we usually do. We're not going to start off with something and then let them do it. They have to just kind of break free. So what we've learned is not only is project-based learning an adjustment for the students, how they learn and how they work in the classroom, it's also an adjustment for the teachers and how they plan and how they execute those lessons. So instead of doing that I do, we do, you do, sort of gradual release of responsibility, you kind of get this spiral effect. I'm going to step back here because I can't talk about something that's directly behind my head. You've got this spiral kind of effect where in the middle you've got what you want the kids to walk away with. What are the success skills, the life skills, the collaboration, the connections? What are the standards? What kind of concepts do we want them to know? Those regrouping, the currency, the economics, the geography. And around that, you've got all these different things that you're throwing in the mix. The kids have to be able to manage their activities. Are they reflecting on what they're doing? Are we assessing them along the way? I had to do so many rubric assessments throughout that 2-3 project. Okay, you just wrote a paragraph that you chose Greece. Let me give you some feedback on why you chose Greece. Let's rewrite that paragraph. You're giving it back to me. While you're giving that back to me, you're working on the map. We talked about geography. You're giving me the map. Oh, you missed these symbols, and here's your paragraph back. There's so many moving parts that you can't stand in front of a classroom and do that I do, we do, you do. So as a teacher, you have to learn how to juggle a lot of different things. I like this thing because it's kind of like a swirl, this graphic. You know, you're designing and planning. We are planning, Taryn and I were planning week after week after week, even though the project had already started. We were coming up with assessment methods, even though the project had already started. We're constantly adjusting. You know what? The kids were doing this, and I think we need to have a debate because the entire class wants to go to Greece. Nobody wants to go to Rome. How are we going to get the kids to reflect on this? So we stopped everything we were doing. We paused the project. The kids are going to debate. We're going to put them on 2 different teams. They have to explain why that country is the better one. All of a sudden, kids were like, hey, Rome is pretty cool too. I'm going to Rome. So there's constantly this changing, and you're responding to the students' needs. So one of the things that we really try to push, and we're kind of learning as a staff, and that I want you guys to take away from this all, is the same way that this is a spiral and we're constantly throwing different things in the mix, PBL in the same way is pulling in experiences from your teachers, from your parents, from your peers, and from your own reflection, and pulling that together into one creative mix, and that's what is going to get you this project at the end, is pulling in from all these different influences. So it's a learning process. It's definitely not something that we can just wake up out of bed and say, you know what, I got it. I know exactly how to do this PBL. After we just finished this first quarter, I know that in reflection, there's a lot that I said, you know what? Next time I do this project, I know what I'm going to do different. And in a way, this is kind of like a project-based learning experience for us as well. We've just executed a project. We're seeing how it goes. We're reflecting on it. We're going to improve upon it. Next quarter, I'm even more excited about the things that I found. So that's something that I really just wanted to share with you guys so that you understand that it's a whole shift in the culture of a school and not just how we're writing the lesson down or what SOLs we're including. We've got to change our thinking in order to embrace this. It's a pretty big feat. There's a lot of questions about what happens next after 5th grade. They're going back into the public school setting. Last year we had a vision meeting. A whole bunch of parents, a whole bunch of stakeholders came into this very room. We looked at some of the innovative practices that are going on in schools across the world. I'm talking like Lego schools in Sweden. I'm talking about a school who built their own playground with robotic arms and recycled tires. There were schools that literally the kids wrote down things that they loved and shared notes for like a good hour every day just talking about how much they loved each other. And the parents and the stakeholders came together and we decided, what is the most important things that we're seeing out there? What are the most important educational practices? And one of the things that I noticed that a lot of the parents said was that they wanted their kids to be good people. A lot of teachers want our students, if nothing else, if my kid can't, do the square root of 687,000, if nothing else, can he share? Can he be a good citizen? Does he know what it's like to contribute to community? In this project-based learning, I feel really focuses on skills and not just the content. So even though that they're going to be going from a project-based learning environment and going into that traditional setting, they're going to know how to cooperate. They're going to know how to engage in material. If they hit a problem, which they might, it will be the first time in the middle school, they'll have the problem-solving skills to solve it because they've just learned how to solve their own problems. They've learned how to communicate their issues. Communication is a huge one. They've made connections. So if you can't figure out what it is in one subject, can you connect it to a subject that you do understand and then solve that problem? Project-based learning is giving the kids skills that they're going to take with them for the rest of their lives. And that's why it's so important. There we go. Rhyming.
Well, I guess the first thing I have to say is I remember Miss Reed and Miss Jenkins, my third and fourth grade teachers, and they were nothing like these amazing women up here. And that's dating way back. Hopefully you can understand how lucky I am to have such a staff like this with their energy and what they do with our children on a day-to-day basis. And this model is a fine example of how we're developing these children in a different way. There is connection with Loudoun County. Loudoun County's new initiative, One to the World, is based around project-based learning and communication skills and 21st century skills. So going into sixth grade, I feel that we will prepare them very well here to meet the challenges of going to a bigger school, to a middle school environment, because they'll be doing those things as well. It's a new initiative coming through county. So we're very excited about what's going on here at Middleburg Community Charter School. We're glad we were able to share that with you in this type of presentation. I'd like to entertain a couple of questions. What we're going to do after we're done here, I'd like to ask some parents that would make some comments out in the hallway for the video program, maybe some teachers who might want to make a comment or two, and I'd also like to ask Ms. Turgeon if she could make a comment afterwards. If you don't have questions and you think of some questions as you go home, please, we're always available for you via email. You can drop by and see us. We're always open to that line of communication. So do we have any real specific questions right now? I do want to say I want to thank you a great deal for coming out in this weather. It was raining like cats and dogs out there, and you braved that weather and you came in, because I think you know it's important. It's important for you to know what your children are doing on a day-to-day basis. And what you saw, the collaboration you had, the movement you were involved with, the teachers coming around to you, that's what your children do on a daily basis. And they learn that way. And that's a very powerful way to learn. Yes, sir.
I'm very much interested in knowing how you can take that model and, in a way, implement it at home so that it essentially enforces that as a child. I find it very interesting because it's very much a pushing model. And so how do you take that as a parent and implement it at home? What kind of, would you guys be willing and entertaining sending projects at home that parents can do so that busy parents don't necessarily have to think about it, but they can take it on to the kids on the weekend? And the other part is, how do you, as parents, because I think a lot of us are type A, how do you change your parenting approach? Are you a coach? Are you an assistant teacher? Are you a lecturer? I'm very much interested.
I'll take a stab at that as a parent and a coach. I think I was that lecturer. And I look at this model and I go back and I think, why don't we just ask questions? If they're having difficulties with something, ask that question, that driving question. Let them try and figure out through your help and your support how to figure out those problems. Bring in their peers if they have peers to help them understand and that question, what that question is and how it relates to not only them, but to their peers, to their siblings, to their mother and their father, to the animals that are in the house, those types of things. Coaching is a very powerful way for a child to learn, and as a coach for so many years, that's what we did as a coach. When you're out on the field, you're giving them problems to solve because they have to solve them themselves as they're moving up and down the field. We can't just stop them every time and say, okay, this is the mistake you made. You have to figure it out according to what the environment they have around them. So I think maybe asking those driving questions, now that you know that that's what we start, that's where our projects start, that's where the thinking starts, those driving questions. And if you continue to ask those at home, they'll probably start doing some of those problem solving on their own. Unlike when I was bringing my kids up, I was telling them what to do instead of asking them what they thought about what should they do.
I was thrilled to be here this evening for the MCCS presentation of PBL. One of the things that struck me the most was the excitement that the teachers have for the learning and the engagement with the students and how that will trickle down to not only the students but the parents. I think the parents were almost just as excited to implement PBL type experiences at home, and so I think that's a wonderful thing to see. As a school board member and someone who tries to foresee the vision for LCPS as a whole, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for MCCS to share with neighboring schools, perhaps, with joint professional development, and share how they're utilizing PBL and implementing it into their classrooms. So I look forward to seeing more from MCCS. I'm thrilled to have been on this journey with them, and I wish you all the best.
So my feelings on tonight's presentation, I was really impressed with the project-based learning method. When I saw the acronym, I actually didn't know what it was. I'm brand new to the school. This was my first exposure to it, and but then once I understood what the acronym was and heard about it, I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for my children. The presentation did focus on project-based learning, basically exclusively, and as I was watching, I had a question to myself as to how all the standards could be met just using a pure project-based learning method, and I asked a question about that and how the kids are assessed in these different areas, and one of the teachers and the principal addressed that and explained that, while it is project-based learning, that is kind of one of the driving teaching methodologies used here. There are also, basically there's a plan and there's constant assessments for making sure that students are on track and are meeting the standards. So I guess my feelings about the school now are that it offers what I'm looking for without the without me fearing, I guess, that my child would somehow fall behind in some subject area, which is, of course, what something that I wouldn't want to happen.
I guess the question is, what is additional support do I think we need here at MCCS to be successful as we move forward through the project-based learning? I've been extremely lucky in getting as much support, human resources, other resources from the board of directors thus far. I think if we continue to stay on that path, then we'll be exactly where we need to be. The biggest thing will be the human resources. We've identified, with the help of Mary and Huey Guy, some quality educators. And as long as we can keep those educators here, whether it be something that the board of directors can do or something that I need to facilitate, then I think we'll move forward in a positive light. I do appreciate everyone coming out tonight. What a great opportunity for Middleburg Community Charter School to show what we're doing here, how we're being somewhat innovative, and showing that we love what we do. And the teachers, if you pay attention to what was going on here tonight, you see the energy. 7:30 at night, they're still energized. They're still ready to go. That's a quality you don't find too often, and it's a quality that we have here with our teachers. So I'm very extremely proud to be here, and I appreciate the support that the board has given me.